Hello, everyone. I was on a little bit of a break, but I'm back with some more chess content today. Today I want to talk about rooks, which are the powerful pieces that I feel beginning players often fail to utilize to their fullest potential. So if you guys want to learn more about how to activate your rooks and win games, then this video is going to be for you. However, I do owe you the final solution to this puzzle from the video from last time. So I'm sure most of you have forgotten by this point, but the puzzle last video was this position that we see in front of us, and I broke it down from basically a rookie level player or novice all the way up to expert level. And I left you guys on a little bit of a cliffhanger. So just to recap basically where we left off last time with this puzzle, we pretty much figured out that white should be ahead here, or we thought white would be ahead here, and that's by this combination of moves here. Rook h7, king a5, and then rook up to h8. Now I'm not really allowing this king to get in the way of this check anymore. So then we have this pawn promotion here, but then the rook would swing over for the check, hitting the king and capturing this queen. And we thought, okay, white should be ahead here if everybody plays perfectly. But if you remember, I mentioned that a grandmaster reviewed this game many years later and figured out that this game should actually end in a draw if both players play perfectly. So that's what I'm going to show you guys today. So if you want to check out the puzzle from last time, please check my last video. And if you just want to figure out the draw that should occur here, please pause it again. And I'll give you a few seconds before I show you guys the draw. Okay, so we're going to go ahead now. So the key here for black is after rook h7, instead of playing the king a5 move that I played before, black should immediately promote this pawn. And after the rook swings over to deliver check, the king needs to go to a5. And then if you guys can see this, we have the a7 check. And the key here is for black to go back to b4. And that's very important because if white captures this queen now, this game ends in a draw by stalemate. And stalemate is when the black king is not in check, but there are no legal moves for the black king or any black piece to make to stay out of check. So it's black's turn to move here, and you'll notice that the bishop covers all these squares. The white king is covering this square, right? The white pawn here is covering this square, and the rook is covering this entire file. This king actually has nowhere to go, cannot move. And because this pawn is locked up, this pawn also can't move. So this game is a stalemate, and this is how it will end if black plays the sequence of moves that he should be playing. The other alternative here is, if white notices that this would be a stalemate, the only other thing white can really do is check the king again. And since the king, again, can't go to any of these squares here, the king's going to have to go back. And white's only possible move here is to go back to a7. So here we have a perpetual check draw. So two different types of draws, but black plays his cards right. This game should end in a draw, and that was the grandmaster solution. So I hope you guys enjoy that. Okay, so now we're going to talk for a bit about rooks. But before we get started, I just wanted to remind you all to please hit the like and subscribe button and share the video with your friends. I appreciate all of you. So, rooks. They are the second most powerful pieces in the game behind the queen. They're worth 5 points, which is more than knights and bishops. And actually, 2 rooks together are actually worth more than the queen. And as you will see in a little bit, I'll show you how 2 rooks can actually dominate the game, given the right set of circumstances. But oftentimes, beginning players don't know how to utilize the rooks. They don't know where to develop them. They don't know what to do with them. So they end up really not being as impactful as they could be. So I guess first question is, how do we typically develop rooks? And normally the first way to do that, the first step in doing that, is by connecting the rooks. And what do we mean by connecting? So we have this position here in front of us with white to move. We traded a couple pieces already. We've made some development, and I guess pause the video here. What would be the best move for white to continue developing here? What would be your move that you would pick? So if you caught bishop to b2, then congratulations, you're awesome. This is an excellent move for a bunch of reasons. So first, we're developing the bishop here. Second, we are developing the bishop and attacking one of black's undefended pawns, which is great. And the third thing we're doing is we're connecting these rooks here. So these rooks are now communicating with each other. They're defending each other, and they now have total freedom, mostly freedom to move across this board here, anywhere from F, E, D, C, B, A files. So very powerful move for white. So now that we've connected the rooks, the next question comes into play as well, where do we want to actually put these rooks on the back rank? What's the best place to put these rooks? So let's say black moves up their queen to defend this pawn here. Okay, so I guess the best general answer for where to develop rooks and where to put your rooks would be look for open files, semi-open files, or files that you're looking to open up shortly. And that's some terminology that I'm throwing at you guys. So let's break down what those mean. So an open file is a file where there are no pawns on either side on this file. And by the way, a file is an up and down portion of the board. Those are files. So we're looking for a file with no pawns on them, essentially. And the reason we want to do that with rooks is because we want to give rooks the flexibility and the freedom to basically move up and down the board as we need to attack enemy pieces, pawns, and attack the enemy king if necessary or if possible. So we want to give all of our pieces, including rooks, as much freedom as they can. So that's basically the goal. So after I just gave you guys that definition for open files, see if you can figure out what open files we have on this board. And I'll give you a few seconds. Okay. So the open file here is the D file. And you can see here that there are no pawns anymore on this file. So this is actually the only open file in the game right now. The reason why this is so important to have pawns is because, kind of similar to what's going on here and what you'll see in a lot of your games, pawns end up running into each other and basically locking positions up. And this is not something that we want to see here. This is not something we want to be behind as a rook. Okay? So we have this D file here that's open. This should be a beautiful place for a rook to go. Now, semi-open files I mentioned as well. It's another good place to put your rooks. Now, what a semi-open file is a file where there's only a pawn of one color on. So, just for an example, the E file here is not semi-open because each side has a pawn here. And as I said, when you have both pawns on a file, oftentimes they lock each other up. And that's not something we want to see. So scan the board really quick again and see if you can find the only semi-open file in this game right now. And that file would be the B file here. So white has the only pawn on this file. Every other file, so the A file has these two. The C file has 3 pawns on it. D file's open, as we said before. E file's got 2 pawns, and the rest the same. There's pawns on both. So this is a semi-open file, and you'll notice that black already has developed his rook to this file, which is good, but this pawn is double defended here. So this pawn is not in danger of being captured right now, but white has to be aware that he has to keep protecting this pawn throughout, his next moves that he's going to be making. He can't be pushing these pawns forward and making this pawn vulnerable as it's under attack. Okay, so we went through semi-open files, open files, and we know that we want to put these rooks on the D file here. That would be the best case scenario for us. So another typical question comes in. Well, which rook do I move over here? Do I move the F rook over to D, or do I move the A rook over? So that really depends on the game, but just some general rules here, also general things that might help you if you can't decide. First of all, the D and the E files, which are the center of the board, we typically want to leave those open for both rooks to occupy if possible. So you notice if you move the F rook over here, then let's just do that. This A rook can no longer move to the E file. It's kind of cut off to these two squares here, which is not great. So that would lead us to want to move the A rook over. The other thing about this particular game that we're playing right here is that it doesn't look like this side of the board is going to see any action anytime soon. I wouldn't expect much to happen here. So in this case, it's definitely best to move the D rook over. It really depends on where you see action happening. You want to put rooks on files where there's going to be openings, there's going to be movement, because that gives them the most freedom to move across the board. All right, now we're going to switch over to a new board, new position, where I can highlight another important concept that I wanted to explain to you guys regarding rooks. So here, this position with white to move, both sides have 2 rooks. In fact, both sides are totally equal in material. The main difference here is that white is currently owning this E file, which is the only open file in the game. So that's a good start for us. But what is better than a rook on an open file? Kind of a trick question. The correct answer is 2 rooks on an open file. Once you put these 2 rooks on here, they're dominating this file. And a good rule of thumb in chess is if you can double up your rooks on an open file, you're more than doubling their power. So you're basically multiplying the power here of rooks. So this is always, not always, it's typically a good solution, a good strategy to go for in the game. And you notice now, black really can't challenge this file anymore. So if black decides to put his rook here, he's losing both rooks. And because actually he hasn't moved any of these pawns, it's actually checkmate. So he moves that rook, and we're going to capture both of them and deliver checkmate here. So very good position for white. I'm going to go back one step here. So let's say instead of doubling the rooks here, white decides to play b4. Okay. So now we're giving black the opportunity to own his file at this point. So now if black plays rook to e8, let's say recapture. Well, black's going to recapture, and when all this dust settles, look who's now owning this open file. So this is something we always want to be wary of. We want to own these, and we want to make sure that when everything clears and the trade is done, that we're the ones who are standing here. So maybe a better idea for white, if black plays this move, is actually to defend the rook here with rook to e1. So now if black takes, we are in position again. We're in a good position. Okay? So that's just a quick summary of that. And we move to another board where I explained to you probably the most important thing there is to know about rooks in endgames, and that is that they thrive on the 7th rank for white. This is where rooks want to be in endgames. And conversely for black, they want to be on one of these squares here. The reason for that, the main reason, is that rooks on the 7th rank, they often attack the pawns that haven't moved yet. And in addition, they often choke out this king and cut off this king from basically making his way into the game. And as some of you may know, when we get towards the end of the game, we want kings to be active participants. Kings become powerful pieces in the end of games. And if we can limit their mobility, that's a really big plus for us. So I'm going to show you guys a typical strategy here, a typical way that putting these rooks on the 7th rank is just dominates positions. So again, we are equal in material. Our rooks are way more active. 2 open files here. These rooks are very passive. So we're going to choose one of these rooks and we're going to put them on the 7th rank. F rook doesn't really work. King's guarding that square. So we're going to put our D rook there. And you'll notice right off the bat, this rook is attacking this weak b7 pawn. Okay, so black's going to have to try to defend this somehow. So the only way is by moving one of these rooks here. So let's say black plays a rook here, defending. Now we bring our 2nd rook onto the 7th rank. And this is such a powerful move in chess. having 2 rooks on the 7th rank that actually has a nickname, and the nickname is pigs on the 7th. And the reason they're called pigs is because they often eat up all the pieces that are unfortunate enough to be remaining on this rank when this happens. So that's just an example of how crazy powerful these are. So once we have these 2 rooks here, we have some options. The first option, which you might notice, is this pawn here. There's no way for black to add another defender to this pawn. Playing this move just loses the rook, so that's not an option. So one strategy we could employ here is just simply capturing this pawn. So let's say black plays a move here. So we've won a pawn. We've traded one of our rooks and we've won a pawn, and we're in position to possibly capture, more pawns here. But there's actually a better move here instead of capturing this pawn. So see if you can spot that. The better move would actually be capturing this g7 pawn. So once we have these rooks connected here on the 7th rank, this king becomes totally harmless to us. The king cannot bother up the rooks on the 7th rank, so this is not really any threat to us. So let's say black makes another move here randomly. We're going to capture here. Or let's say actually a better move for black instead of moving this pawn, maybe playing rook here, creating another active rook for some counterplay for black. So let's say he does that. We're going to capture this pawn. And there's nothing that black can do about it. He's just powerless. So say black moves here. Now we're in position to capture this pawn if we want. Now we're up 2 pawns because of this strategy here, putting our rooks on the 7th rank. Okay, but I'm going to go back one more time after we put our rooks here. I'm going to illuminate one final reason why this is so powerful, and that's because this can lead to a lot of checkmating attacks. So we've got, let's say black makes a move trying to trade the rooks at this point. Let's say black plays rook to f8. He wants to get rid of them, so he wants us to trade. He doesn't like the fact that these are on the 7th rank. Try to see if you can find a great move for white here. This game, at this point, is actually lost for black. This game's over. So see if you can pause the video and figure out how to end this game for white. I'll give you a few seconds. Okay. So the move here, again, is rook captures on g7. And the key here is that black's rook is actually preventing its king from escaping our checks at this point. It's kind of cutting off the king's mobility again. So we play rook g7 check. The black king only has one move here. That's h8. We're going to play h7 check. Again, black only has one move with the king. That's here. And we deliver the final blow. King has nowhere to run. This is covered. These rooks are protecting themselves, and that is checkmate. So this is a pretty common checkmating technique. And, you know, it doesn't have to be with your opponent's rooks. Sometimes, say, this could be a knight in this position also, preventing the black king from escaping. And this is just common, and it's something that every chess player should know how to do. Okay, I think that pretty much wraps up the lesson today. Hopefully your guys' heads aren't spinning too much. But I did want to leave you guys with a puzzle. And this puzzle really, hopefully, will drive home some of the lessons that I taught you guys, specifically the last lesson about pigs on the 7th. So this game was a real game. It was Jose Raul Capablanca with the white pieces versus Walbret in 1909. So this is a position we have in front of us with white. And you'll notice that we actually have pigs on the 7th here. And you'll notice that this is fairly similar to the checkmating scenario that we just had, but not quite. So why don't you guys pause the video here. First of all, see if you can figure out what the difference is between this video, or this puzzle, and the last puzzle we just had. What's preventing us from delivering the checkmate with the pigs on the 7th here? And then secondly, after you guys figure that out, see if you can figure out the idea that Capablanca had here. to win the game for him. So I'll give you guys a few seconds. Okay. So the difference in this game is black's queen on h6. This queen is guarding both these squares, and both these squares are very important for us to deliver our checkmate. So black's rook here is blocking his king, and we need to be able to access these two squares without being captured in order to do this. And that's what Capablanca saw. So Capablanca's move here was a queen sacrifice, queen g5, and his opponent immediately resigned the game here. So the point is, like I just said, this queen is vitally important to maintaining black's safety here. This queen is undefended. So black is seemingly forced to capture here. And once black captures, we have the same exact sequence that we had before, with a series of checks that lead to checkmate. So that's why black resigned the game here. However, black actually had a saving grace here. He had a way to save this game that Capablanca found after the game was over. So if you guys want, you can pause the video again and see after queen g5 if there's a way for black to save the game and continue fighting on. Okay. So the move here, hopefully if you guys were doing this, the first thing you should look for in positions like this are checks, because oftentimes they're lifesavers. So the actual solution here, or the way for black to save this, is to play rook e1 check. White king can't go here because black queen's already covering it. So white king only has one move, and black's going to rotate this rook around to h1. And now he's guarding this queen. So now let's say white captures the queen. Black's going to capture back, and now this rook is protecting the square. So now we do the same sequence. Well, we just basically lost the game for white. So that is a pretty tough thing to see, but I think the moral of the story here is never give up. If you're down in chess, always see if you can find a way to survive. And I mean, there is a way to survive here, and this is against Josero Capablanca, who is, by the way, one of the best players to ever play. So if you have a chance against him that you could possibly see, then there's going to be a lot of chances in your games too. So don't forget that, guys. All right. That wraps up the video for today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.